In the shadowed halls of Valdoria Palace, where crown jewels glitter and secrets lurk behind every tapestry, a single hidden camera threatens to expose the most shocking conspiracy in royal history. When Prince Alexander discovers that his own stepmother, Queen Serena, has been watching his wife's every move, he uncovers a plot so sinister it could destroy the monarchy forever. Sometimes the greatest enemies live within the castle walls, and sometimes love becomes the most dangerous weapon of all. The Hidden Camera. Story Part 1. The morning mist clung to the ancient stone walls of Valdoria Palace like secrets refusing to be told. Prince Alexander walked through the corridors with the weight of a kingdom on his shoulders, his footsteps echoing against marble floors that had witnessed centuries of royal triumphs and tragedies. The palace, with its towering spires and endless hallways, had always felt like home to him. Today, however, something felt different. Something felt wrong. Alexander paused outside the nursery door, listening to the soft sounds from within. Princess Isabella, his beloved wife, was inside with their 6-month-old daughter, Princess Sophia. The gentle lullaby Isabella hummed drifted through the heavy oak door, and Alexander smiled despite the strange unease that had been growing in his chest for weeks. Ever since Queen Serena had returned from her extended stay in Switzerland, the palace had felt different, colder, more dangerous. Queen Serena was his stepmother, having married his father, King Charles, 5 years ago after his mother's tragic death in a car accident. From the beginning, Alexander had sensed something calculating about Serena. She was beautiful, charming, and politically astute, but there was an emptiness behind her emerald eyes that made him uncomfortable. His father, however, had been completely enchanted by her, and Alexander had kept his concerns to himself out of respect for the grieving king. The heavy door creaked as Alexander pushed it open. Nursery was bathed in golden morning light streaming through tall windows adorned with silk curtains. Isabella sat in an ornate rocking chair, cradling little Sophia against her chest. Her auburn hair cascaded over her shoulders like liquid copper, and her blue eyes sparkled with the pure joy that motherhood had brought her. She looked up as Alexander entered, her face lighting up with the same smile that had captured his heart 3 years ago. "Good morning, my love," Isabella whispered, careful not to wake their sleeping daughter. Sophia finally fell asleep after being fussy all night. "I think she might be getting her first tooth." Alexander crossed the room and knelt beside the rocking chair, gently stroking Sophia's downy blonde hair. The baby stirred slightly, but remained peacefully asleep. These quiet family moments were what Alexander treasured most, away from the endless ceremonies, diplomatic meetings, and political pressures that defined royal life. "You look tired," he observed, noticing the faint circles under Isabella's eyes. "You should rest. I can stay with Sophia for a while." Isabella shook her head with a soft smile. "I'm fine. Besides, I love these peaceful mornings with her. Sometimes I feel like we're just a normal family, not royalty under constant scrutiny." The word scrutiny struck Alexander strangely. Over the past few weeks, he had noticed Isabella becoming more withdrawn, more anxious. She had mentioned feeling watched, feeling like someone was monitoring their private family time. Alexander had initially dismissed her concerns as new mother anxiety, but now he wondered if there might be more to it. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Guard Captain Marcus Blackwood entered the room with his usual formal bearing, but Alexander immediately noticed the tension in the older man's shoulders. Marcus had been protecting the royal family for over 20 years, and Alexander had learned to read his expressions like a weathered map. "Your Highness," Marcus said, bowing slightly. "Forgive the interruption, but there's something I need to discuss with you privately." It's urgent." Alexander felt his stomach tighten. In royal life, urgent rarely meant good news. He kissed Isabella's forehead gently and touched Sophia's tiny hand before following Marcus into the hallway. The guard captain's weathered face was grim, his gray eyes reflecting a concern that Alexander had rarely seen in the normally unflappable man. "What is it, Marcus?" Alexander asked, closing the nursery door behind them. Marcus glanced around the corridor, ensuring they were alone. Even then, he lowered his voice to barely above a whisper. "Your Highness, during my routine security check this morning, I discovered something disturbing in the nursery." "Disturbing how?" Marcus reached into his jacket and withdrew a small device no larger than a button. Alexander stared at it, not immediately understanding what he was looking at. The device was black. almost invisible with a tiny lens that glinted in the hallway's chandelier light. "This is a high-end surveillance camera, Your Highness," Marcus explained. "Wireless, nearly undetectable, and capable of transmitting both video and audio. I found it hidden behind the decorative molding near the window. It had a perfect view of the rocking chair where Princess Isabella spends time with Princess Sophia." The blood drained from Alexander's face. Someone had been watching his wife and daughter in their most private, intimate moments. The violation felt like a physical blow. "How long has it been there?" "Based on the dust patterns, I estimate at least 2 weeks, possibly longer. The device is sophisticated, military-grade. This isn't the work of paparazzi or amateur stalkers. Someone with significant resources and technical knowledge placed this here." Rod. Alexander's hands clenched into fists. The protective instinct that every father feels when his family is threatened surged through him like a wildfire. "D. Who has access to the nursery?" "That's what concerns me most, Your Highness. The nursery is in the private wing of the palace. D. Access is strictly limited to immediate family members, their personal staff, and senior security personnel. Whoever did this either has legitimate access or managed to bypass our most sophisticated security systems." The implications hit Alexander like a sledgehammer. This wasn't an external threat. This was someone inside the palace, someone they trusted, someone who had been watching Isabella and Sophia without their knowledge or consent. The violation felt even more sinister knowing it came from within their own walls. "Have you told anyone else about this?" Alexander asked. "No, Your Highness. I came directly to you. However, I should mention that I've noticed other irregularities in the security logs over the past month. Discrepancies in the access records for the private wing." Alexander's mind raced through the possibilities. Who would want to spy on Isabella and Sophia? What could they possibly gain from watching private family moments? Unless this wasn't about gathering information. Unless this was about something much more sinister. "Marcus," Alexander said slowly, "I want you to conduct a complete security sweep of our private quarters. Every room, every device, everything. But do it discreetly. I don't want whoever did this to know we've discovered their surveillance." "Of course, Your Highness." "Should I inform the king?" Alexander hesitated. His father had been increasingly frail since his heart attack 6 months ago. The stress of ruling, combined with his advancing age, had taken a significant toll on King Charles. Adding the worry of a security breach in his son's family quarters might be more than the old king could handle. Besides, Alexander had a growing suspicion that he needed to be very careful about who he trusted with this information. "Not yet," Alexander decided. "Let's gather more information first. I want to know exactly what we're dealing with before we involve anyone else." Marcus nodded with approval. "Very wise, Your Highness. In situations like this, discretion is often our greatest asset." As Marcus disappeared down the corridor to begin his security sweep, Alexander remained in the hallway, staring at the tiny camera in his palm. Someone had violated the most sacred space in his life, the place where he and Isabella were raising their daughter. During her most vulnerable moments as a new mother, the rage building inside him was unlike anything he had ever experienced. Alexander thought about Isabella's recent anxiety, her feeling of being watched. Her maternal instincts had been trying to warn her that something was wrong. How many nights had she sat in that rocking chair, singing to Sophia, while unknown eyes observed their every move? The thought made him feel sick. He returned to the nursery, where Isabella was now standing at the window, gently bouncing Sophia in her arms. The morning light created a beautiful silhouette, and Alexander realized with horror that this was exactly the view the hidden camera would have captured. Someone had been watching this exact scene, recording these precious family moments for unknown purposes. "Is everything all right?" Isabella asked, noticing the tension in his expression. "You look pale." Alexander forced a smile, not wanting to alarm her until he had more answers. "Just some routine security matters. Nothing to worry about." But Isabella knew him too well to be fooled by his reassurances. She had always been able to read his moods, to see through his diplomatic face to the real emotions beneath. "Alexander, something's been bothering you for weeks, and I know something's been bothering me too." Another one. "I keep feeling like," she paused, looking embarrassed. "I keep feeling like someone's watching us. I know it sounds paranoid, but I can't shake the feeling." Broke a little more. His wife's instincts had been right all along, and he had dismissed her concerns. Isabella, I promise you that I will get to the bottom of whatever is making you feel uncomfortable. Your safety and Sophia's safety are my top priorities. Isabella studied his face carefully. This isn't about routine security, is it? Before Alexander could answer, they heard footsteps in the corridor outside. Heavy, purposeful footsteps that Alexander recognized immediately. Queen Serena was approaching the nursery, her heels clicking against the marble floor with military precision. The nursery door opened, and Queen Serena entered with her characteristic regal bearing. She was impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit, her platinum blonde hair pulled back in an elegant chignon. Her emerald eyes swept the room, taking in every detail with an intensity that suddenly seemed far more sinister than Alexander had previously noticed. "Good morning, Alexander. Isabella?" Serena said, her voice smooth as silk. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "Of course not," Isabella replied politely, though Alexander noticed she instinctively held Sophia a little closer. "We were just enjoying some quiet time with Sophia." Serena's eyes fixed on the baby with an expression that Alexander couldn't quite read. "She's growing so quickly. Such a beautiful child. It's remarkable how vulnerable babies are at this age, isn't it? They depend completely on their parents for protection." The comment sent a chill down Alexander's spine. Was there a hidden meaning in Serena's words, or was his newfound suspicion making him read threats where none existed? "All parents worry about protecting their children," Alexander replied carefully. "It's natural." "Oh, absolutely," Serena agreed, moving closer to the window. "Though some threats are much closer than we realize. Sometimes the very people we trust most are the ones we should fear." Isabella shifted uncomfortably, and Sophia began to fuss as if sensing the tension in the room. The baby's cries seemed to break whatever spell Serena had been weaving with her ominous words. "I should feed her," Isabella said quickly. "If you'll excuse me." As Isabella moved toward the door with Sophia, Serena called out, "Isabella, you've seemed quite tired lately. Perhaps you should consider taking a vacation. Somewhere far from the palace. The mountains, perhaps. The fresh air would do you good." Alexander felt his blood run cold. The suggestion sounded less like concern and more like a threat, or maybe a plan. Profile of Thomas. His hand instinctively moved to his pocket, where the tiny surveillance camera rested like a piece of evidence in a crime that was only beginning to unfold. "Isabella is perfectly fine," Alexander said firmly. "We have no plans for any trips at the moment." Serena's smile never wavered, but something dark flickered in her eyes. "Of course. I'm sure you know what's best for your family. Though sometimes, Alexander, we don't see dangers until it's too late to prevent them." After Serena left the nursery, Alexander stood alone in the room where someone had been secretly watching his wife and daughter. The golden morning light no longer seemed warm and peaceful. It felt exposed, vulnerable, dangerous. As he looked around the nursery, at the rocking chair where Isabella spent hours with Sophia, at the crib where their daughter slept peacefully, at the window where the camera had been hidden, Alexander realized that nothing in his life would ever feel safe again until he discovered who had violated their sanctuary and why. The tiny camera in his pocket felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. It was evidence of a betrayal so deep that it threatened not just his family's privacy, but possibly their very lives. As Alexander left the nursery and began to formulate a plan to uncover the truth, he had no idea that this discovery was only the beginning of a conspiracy that would shake the very foundations of the kingdom and force him to question everyone he had ever trusted. The hunt for answers was about to begin, and Alexander was determined to protect his family at any cost, even if it meant discovering that his enemies were closer than he had ever imagined possible. The investigation begins. 3 days had passed since Guard Captain Marcus discovered the hidden camera, and the secret investigation was already revealing disturbing patterns that made Alexander's blood run cold. He sat in his private study, surrounded by security reports, access logs, and surveillance footage that Marcus had discreetly gathered. The evidence was mounting, and every piece pointed toward a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of the palace hierarchy. Desk. His weathered face grim as he presented his findings. "Your Highness, what we've discovered goes far beyond a single surveillance device. Your Highness, what we've discovered goes far beyond a single surveillance device." Someone has been conducting systematic surveillance of your family for months. Alexander looked up from the documents, his jaw tight with barely controlled anger. Show me everything. Marcus spread several photographs across the desk. Each one showed tiny surveillance devices that had been hidden throughout the private wing of the palace. Cameras disguised as decorative elements, listening devices embedded in picture frames, even tracking devices hidden inside toys that had been given to Princess Sophia. We found a total of 17 surveillance devices, Marcus reported. Cameras in the nursery, your private dining room, the family sitting room, and even in Princess Isabella's dressing room. Audio recording devices in the hallways, the nursery again, and concealed in the baby's mobile above her crib. The violation felt even more massive than Alexander had initially feared. 1,000. Someone hadn't just been watching occasional moments, they had been monitoring every aspect of his family's private life. How long have these been in place? Based on the installation patterns and dust accumulation, some have been there for up to 3 months, others are more recent, installed within the past few weeks. 3 months. Alexander calculated backwards in his mind. 3 months ago, Isabella had just given birth to Sophia. Someone had been watching them during those precious early days of their daughter's life, recording Isabella's most vulnerable moments as a new mother, documenting their family's most intimate experiences.
What about the access logs? Alexander asked, his voice dangerously quiet.
He's pulled out a thick folder filled with security records. This is where it gets particularly interesting, Your Highness. The devices were installed during specific time windows when certain individuals had legitimate access to the private wing. I've cross-referenced the installation timeframes with the access logs. Alexander studied the documents, looking for patterns. The access logs showed the usual suspects: household staff, security personnel, family members, and occasional maintenance workers. But as he examined the timing more carefully, one name appeared consistently during every installation window. Queen Serena, Alexander said, his voice barely above a whisper. Yes, Your Highness. Queen Serena had access to the private wing during every single installation timeframe. Thereby, she also made several requests for routine maintenance in areas where devices were later discovered. Alexander felt the world shift beneath him. His stepmother, the woman his father had married and welcomed into their family, had been systematically spying on his wife and child. But why? What could she possibly hope to gain from such extensive surveillance? There's more, Your Highness, Marcus continued. I conducted a discreet background investigation into Queen Serena's activities before and after her marriage to the king. What I discovered is troubling. Marcus handed Alexander another folder, this one containing financial records, travel documents, and communication logs. As Alexander read through the documents, a disturbing picture began to emerge. Queen Serena had significant debts before her marriage to King Charles, debts that had mysteriously disappeared after she became queen. She had also maintained contact with several individuals who had questionable backgrounds and concerning political affiliations. She's been in communication with Viktor Kozlov, Marcus pointed out, indicating a name on the communication logs. Kozlov is a known arms dealer with connections to several destabilized regions. He's also been linked to political assassination plots in other European kingdoms. Alexander's blood ran cold. An arms dealer. Assassination plots. The implications were staggering. You think she's planning to? I think we need to consider all possibilities, Your Highness. The level of surveillance suggests this isn't about gathering information for blackmail or political leverage. This appears to be reconnaissance for something much more serious. Alexander stood up from his desk and walked to the window, staring out at the palace gardens where Isabella often took Sophia for walks. The beautiful, peaceful scene now looked fraught with danger. How many times had they walked those paths while someone monitored their movements? How many quiet family moments had been recorded and analyzed by people with malicious intent? We need more evidence, Alexander decided. Suspicion isn't enough. If we're going to confront Queen Serena or involve my father, we need concrete proof of what she's planning. Marcus nodded. I've taken the liberty of setting up counter-surveillance measures. We're now monitoring Queen Serena's communications and movements, but we're being extremely careful to avoid detection. If she realizes we're onto her, she might accelerate whatever timeline she's working with. A soft knock at the study door interrupted their conversation. Alexander quickly gathered the documents and photos, sliding them into his desk drawer as Isabella entered the room carrying Sophia. His wife looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes more pronounced than they had been just days ago. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Isabella said, "but Sophia's been fussy all morning, and I thought maybe seeing her father might help calm her down." Alexander immediately went to Isabella, taking Sophia into his arms. The baby's cries softened as he held her, but he could see the strain on Isabella's face. The stress of feeling watched and unsafe in her own home was taking a visible toll on his wife. "Isabella, how have you been sleeping?" Alexander asked, noticing her hands trembling slightly. "Not well," she admitted. "I keep waking up feeling like someone's watching us. I know you said it was just new mother anxiety, but the feeling's getting stronger, not weaker. Last night I could have sworn I heard something in the walls, like electronic humming." Alexander and Marcus exchanged a look. The listening devices would create a faint electronic hum that someone with sensitive hearing might detect. Isabella's maternal instincts had been trying to protect her and Sophia all along. "Perhaps we should consider having Dr. Morrison examine you," Alexander suggested carefully. "Make sure everything's all right health-wise." Isabella shook her head. "I'm not sick, Alexander. Something is wrong in this palace. I can feel it. Sophia can feel it too. Look how fussy she's been lately. Babies are sensitive to tension and danger." Before Alexander could respond, another knock came at the door. This time it was Queen Serena herself, entering without waiting for permission. Alexander noticed how her eyes immediately swept the room, taking inventory of what they might have been discussing. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important," Serena said, though her tone suggested she didn't much care if she was. "Isabella, you look quite pale. Are you feeling all right?" "I'm fine," Isabella replied, though her voice lacked conviction. Serena moved closer, studying Isabella with an intensity that made Alexander uncomfortable. "You know, exhaustion in new mothers can be quite dangerous. Sometimes women in your condition make poor decisions. Sometimes they even have accidents." The words hung in the air like a threat, and Alexander felt Sophia tense in his arms, as if she too sensed the malevolence in the room. "What kind of accidents?" Alexander asked, his voice carefully controlled. Serena's smile was cold as winter. "Oh, all sorts. Drowning incidents during bath time, car crashes on mountain roads. New mothers are often so tired, so distracted, they don't pay attention to their surroundings the way they should." Isabella moved closer to Alexander, instinctively seeking protection. "Those are terrible things to say. I'm simply being realistic," Serena replied. "The world is a dangerous place, especially for young mothers and their children. Sometimes the best protection is to remove oneself from dangerous situations entirely." Alexander felt Marcus tense beside him, and he knew they were all thinking the same thing. This wasn't a casual conversation. This was a warning, maybe even an ultimatum. "We appreciate your concern," Alexander said firmly, "but Isabella and Sophia are perfectly safe in the palace." "Are they?" Serena asked, raising an eyebrow. "Security can fail, Alexander. Guards can be distracted or compromised. Even the most protected places can become dangerous when the wrong people have access." After Serena left, the study fell into heavy silence. Isabella was visibly shaking and Sophia had begun crying again, as if picking up on the threat that had just filled the room. "Alexander," Isabella whispered. What was she really saying? That felt like she was threatening us. Alexander looked at Marcus, who nodded slightly. The time for protecting Isabella from the truth had passed. She was already living in fear. She deserved to know why. "Isabella, I need you to listen to me very carefully," Alexander began. "What you've been feeling, the sense that someone's watching us, it's not paranoia. Someone has been conducting surveillance on our family." Isabella's face went white. "What do you mean?" Alexander explained about the hidden cameras, the listening devices, the systematic monitoring of their private moments. With each revelation, Isabella's expression grew more horrified and more frightened. "Who would do this to us?" she asked, clutching Sophia protectively. Alexander took a deep breath. "We believe it's Queen Serena." The words hit Isabella like a physical blow. "Fine." She sank into a chair, holding Sophia close to her chest.
"Your stepmother?"
"But why? What could she possibly want?" "We're still investigating," Marcus interjected. But we believe the surveillance is preparation for something more serious. The conversation we just witnessed suggests that Queen Serena may be planning to harm you and Princess Sophia. Isabella's eyes filled with tears. She wants to kill us? But why? Alexander knelt beside his wife's chair, taking her free hand in both of his. I don't know why yet, but I promise you that I will find out. And I promise that I will protect you and Sophia, no matter what it takes. What do we do? Isabella asked, her voice barely audible. Alexander looked at Marcus again. The odd they had discussed this possibility. If Queen Serena was indeed planning violence against Isabella and Sophia, they needed to move quickly but carefully. We're going to set a trap, Alexander decided. If Queen Serena thinks we're unaware of the surveillance, we can use that to our advantage. We'll feed her false information and see how she responds. That sounds dangerous, Isabella protested. Staying here and doing nothing is more dangerous, Alexander replied. At least this way, we'll have some control over the situation. Marcus stepped forward. Your Highness, if I may suggest, we should also consider moving Princess Isabella and Princess Sophia to a secure location until we can neutralize the threat. No, Isabella said firmly. If we run, she wins. Besides, where could we go that would be safer than the palace? At least here we have security, protocols, people we trust. But we can't trust everyone, Alexander pointed out. If Queen Serena has been able to install this level of surveillance, she might have accomplices among the staff or security personnel. As they discussed their options, Alexander's phone buzzed with a message. He glanced at it and felt his heart stop. The message was from an unknown number, but the content was unmistakable. A photo of Isabella and Sophia, taken just that morning in the nursery, with a single line of text. Beautiful family. It would be tragic if something happened to them. Alexander showed the message to Marcus and Isabella. Isabella's face went chalk white, and she began crying silently, holding Sophia so tightly that the baby began to protest. It's starting, Marcus said grimly. Whatever Queen Serena is planning, she's moving into the active threat phase. Alexander felt a rage unlike anything he had ever experienced. Someone was threatening his wife and child, someone who lived in his own home, someone his father trusted and loved. The violation was complete and terrifying. We end this now, Alexander declared. Marcus, I want you to gather our most trusted security personnel. About it. People you would stake your life on. We're going to conduct our own surveillance on Queen Serena, and we're going to document everything she does. But take it to my father and the authorities. And if she acts before we gather sufficient evidence, Marcus asked. Alexander looked at his wife and daughter, both vulnerable and depending on him for protection. Then we stop her by whatever means necessary. I will not let anyone harm my family. As the afternoon wore on, Alexander, Isabella, and Marcus developed a comprehensive plan to uncover Queen Serena's conspiracy while keeping Isabella and Sophia safe. They established secure communication protocols, identified trusted allies within the palace staff, and created contingency plans for various scenarios. But even as they planned and prepared, Alexander couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. The threat was escalating, and Queen Serena was becoming bolder and more direct in her intimidation tactics. Soon, Alexander feared, she would move beyond threats to action, and when that moment came, he needed to be ready to protect everything he held dear. The game of cat and mouse was about to begin in earnest, and Alexander was determined that when it ended, his family would be safe, and Queen Serena would face justice for her crimes. But first, he had to survive long enough to expose the full extent of her conspiracy, and that was going to require more courage and cunning than anything he had ever attempted before. The trap is set. The grand ballroom of Valdoria Palace sparkled under crystal chandeliers as the kingdom's elite gathered for the annual Children's Charity Gala. Prince Alexander moved through the crowd with practiced royal grace, shaking hands and making polite conversation, but his attention was focused entirely on the elaborate trap he and Marcus had spent 2 weeks planning. Tonight they would finally get the evidence they needed to expose Queen Serena's deadly conspiracy. Isabella stood beside him, radiant in a midnight blue gown that complemented her auburn hair, but Alexander could see the tension in her shoulders despite her brilliant smile. They had decided that Isabella should attend the gala as planned, maintaining their normal routine while Marcus and his most trusted security personnel monitored Queen Serena's every move. Sophia was safely hidden away in a secure location known only to Alexander, Isabella, and two guards whose loyalty Marcus had personally verified over decades of service. Queen Serena glided through the ballroom like a predator surveying her territory. She wore an emerald green gown that matched her calculating eyes, and every gesture, every smile, every conversation seemed carefully calculated. Alexander watched her from across the room, noting how she positioned herself near the exits, how she checked her phone frequently, how her eyes constantly tracked Isabella's movements. The past 2 weeks had been a masterclass in psychological warfare. Alexander and his team had planted false information about Isabella's daily routines, fabricated travel plans, and created fake security vulnerabilities, all while carefully documenting Queen Serena's responses. Every piece of disinformation they leaked found its way back to Viktor Kozlov, the arms dealer. The pattern was unmistakable. Queen Serena was feeding intelligence to dangerous people outside the palace. Marcus approached Alexander with a champagne flute in his hand, playing his role as an off-duty security chief perfectly. "The packages are in position," he said quietly, his words referring to the hidden recording devices they had planted in Queen Serena's private quarters. "Our mutual friend should have everything she needs by midnight." Alexander nodded, understanding that Marcus was confirming their timeline. Tonight, while Queen Serena was distracted by the gala, Marcus's team was searching her rooms and documenting everything they found. They had already discovered encrypted communications, detailed floor plans of the private wing, and what appeared to be architectural drawings showing structural weaknesses in various parts of the palace. Isabella excused herself from a conversation with the French ambassador's wife and moved to Alexander's side. "She's been staring at me all evening," she whispered. "It's making my skin crawl." Alexander followed Isabella's gaze to where Queen Serena stood with a group of wealthy philanthropists, but her attention was clearly focused on Isabella rather than the conversation around her. The intensity of Serena's stare was almost predatory, like a hunter sizing up prey. "Abduction, just a little longer," Alexander murmured. "After tonight, this will all be over." But even as he spoke those words, Alexander felt a chill of premonition. Queen Serena's behavior tonight seemed different, more urgent somehow. She kept checking her phone, stepping away for whispered conversations, and glancing toward the ballroom's exits as if she were expecting something or someone. The evening's entertainment began with a children's choir from the local orphanage, their sweet voices filling the ballroom with songs of hope and innocence. Alexander watched Queen Serena during the performance and noticed something that made his blood run cold. By the children singing, Serena was typing furiously on her phone, her face illuminated by the screen's glow. Marcus appeared at Alexander's elbow again. "We have a problem," he said, his voice barely audible. "Queen Serena just sent a message that said, 'Accelerate timeline, execute tonight.' We intercepted it before it reached Kozlov, but she'll know it didn't go through when he doesn't respond." Alexander felt the world tilt around him. Tonight. Whatever Queen Serena had been planning was happening tonight, not tomorrow or next week as they had hoped. Their careful trap was about to become a desperate fight for survival. "Where's the backup site?" Alexander asked, referring to the secure location where Sophia was hidden. "Secure and monitored," Marcus confirmed. "But if Queen Serena has moved up her timeline, we need to assume she has contingencies we don't know about." Isabella had been listening to their whispered conversation, and Alexander saw the fear creep into her eyes. "What's happening?" she asked. Before Alexander could answer, the lights in the ballroom flickered and went out completely, plunging the elegant gathering into darkness. Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, casting everything in an eerie red glow, but the damage was done. In the confusion of hundreds of people trying to navigate in the darkness, Alexander lost sight of Queen Serena. "She's gone," Marcus said grimly, speaking into his radio to coordinate with his security team. "All units locate Queen Serena immediately. Consider her extremely dangerous." Alexander grabbed Isabella's hand and began moving toward the ballroom's main exit, but they were caught in a crowd of confused and frightened guests. The darkness had turned the elegant gala into a scene of chaos, with people stumbling over each other and calling out for friends and family members. "This way," Marcus directed, leading them toward a service entrance that would be less crowded. As they moved through the crowd, Alexander's phone buzzed with a message. He glanced at it and felt his heart stop. The message was from Queen Serena. The games are over, Alexander. You've been very clever, but not clever enough. Talker, your wife has 30 minutes to come to the East Tower alone, or your daughter dies. No security, no tricks, no rescues. On. Just Isabella. Or I start sending you pieces of your child. Isabella read the message over his shoulder and went white as snow. She has Sophia? How is that possible? Marcus was already coordinating with his team through his radio, his face grim as he received updates. The secure location has been compromised, he reported. Our people are unconscious but alive. Sophia is gone. Alexander felt a rage so pure it almost blinded him. Queen Serena had outmaneuvered them, had been several steps ahead all along. While they thought they were setting a trap for her, she had been laying a trap for them. I have to go to her, Isabella said, her voice steady despite the terror in her eyes. She has our baby. Absolutely not. Alexander replied immediately. This is exactly what she wants. If you go to that tower alone, you'll both die. If I don't go, Sophia dies for certain, Isabella countered. At least this way there's a chance. Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice so only they could hear. Your Highness, the East Tower is isolated, with only one entrance. If Princess Isabella goes there alone, it would be a death trap. But if we can coordinate properly, we might be able to use Queen Serena's own trap against her. Alexander looked at his wife, seeing the desperate love of a mother willing to sacrifice herself for her child. He thought about Sophia, barely 6 months old, completely innocent and vulnerable. Then he thought about Queen Serena, who had violated their home, threatened their family, and now held his daughter hostage. What do you have in mind? Alexander asked Marcus. Baptiste, Princess Isabella goes to the tower as requested, but she wears a wire and a tracking device. We position snipers around the tower and monitor everything. The moment Princess Isabella and Princess Sophia are in the same room, we move. That's still incredibly dangerous for both of them, Alexander pointed out. Yes, Marcus agreed, but it's the best chance we have to save them both and capture Queen Serena with evidence of her crimes. Isabella was already nodding. I'll do it. But Alexander, you have to promise me something. If it comes down to choosing between saving me and saving Sophia, you save our daughter. Promise me. Alexander felt tears burning his eyes. Isabella, I can't. Promise me, she insisted. If something goes wrong, if you can only save one of us, you save Sophia. She's innocent. She has her whole life ahead of her. Promise me. Alexander pulled Isabella into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. I promise I'll save both of you, he whispered fiercely. I promise I'll bring you both home safely. As they prepared for the most dangerous gamble of their lives, Alexander couldn't help but think about how much had changed since that morning when Marcus first discovered the hidden camera. What had started as a violation of privacy had revealed a conspiracy that threatened the very foundations of the kingdom. Queen Serena wasn't just planning to hurt Isabella and Sophia. She was planning to destabilize the entire royal family. 20 minutes later, Isabella walked alone through the palace corridors toward the East Tower, every step monitored by Alexander and his security team. She wore a wire so thin it was virtually invisible, and tracking devices that would allow them to locate her even if the signal was blocked. Alexander followed her progress on a tablet, watching the small dot that represented his wife moving closer to danger with each passing second. Marcus coordinated with snipers positioned around the tower, while other security personnel prepared for rapid deployment the moment Alexander gave the order. She's reached the tower entrance, Marcus reported. All teams are in position. Alexander watched the tablet screen as Isabella's signal disappeared into the tower. From this moment forward, they were flying blind, dependent on the wire and their carefully laid plans. But Queen Serena had already proven herself to be unpredictable and dangerous. There was no guarantee that their preparations would be enough. In the East Tower, Isabella climbed the ancient stone steps, each footfall echoing in the narrow stairwell. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure it would give away her position, but she forced herself to keep moving. Somewhere above her, Queen Serena waited with Sophia, and Isabella was determined to bring her daughter home no matter what it cost. As she reached the top of the stairs, Isabella could hear Sophia crying. The sound every mother knows and recognizes instantly. The sound gave her strength and purpose. Her baby was alive, which meant there was still hope. The heavy wooden door to the tower room stood slightly ajar, and Isabella could see candlelight flickering beyond it. She took a deep breath, said a silent prayer for strength and courage, and pushed the door open. Queen Serena stood in the center of the circular room, holding Sophia in her arms. But this wasn't the elegant, composed queen that Isabella had known for 3 years. Barry. This woman looked wild, desperate, dangerous. Her platinum hair was disheveled, her emerald dress wrinkled and stained, and her eyes held a madness that made Isabella's blood run cold. "Welcome, Isabella," Queen Serena said, her voice honey-sweet despite the circumstances. "I was beginning to think you might not come. That would have been very unfortunate for little Sophia here." Sophia's cries intensified when she saw her mother, and Isabella felt every maternal instinct screaming at her to grab her child and run. But she forced herself to remain still, knowing that any sudden movement could trigger violence. "I'm here," Isabella said, keeping her voice calm and steady. "Now let me have my daughter." Queen Serena laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Oh, my dear naive Isabella. This isn't a simple exchange. This is the beginning of the end of your perfect little family." What do you want?" Isabella asked. "What do I want?" Serena's eyes blazed with hatred. "I want everything you have. Your husband, your position, your child, your life. You walked into this palace and took everything that should have been mine." Isabella stared at her, confused. "I don't understand. You married the king." "You're already queen." "I married a dying old man," Serena spat. "Charles was supposed to be a stepping stone to real power, but then precious Alexander went and found his true love, had his perfect baby, and suddenly my position became secondary to yours. You became the future of this kingdom while I remained married to the past." The pieces suddenly fell into place for Isabella. This wasn't about money or political power. This was about jealousy, about a woman who had gambled everything on marrying into the royal family, only to find herself overshadowed by a younger woman who had genuine love and happiness. "So you decided to eliminate the competition?" Isabella said. "I decided to take what should have been mine from the beginning," Serena corrected. "With you and your daughter dead, Alexander will be devastated, broken. He'll need comfort, support, someone to help him through his grief. And I'll be there for him, the loving stepmother who shares his loss." "You're insane if you think Alexander would ever turn to you after you murdered his family." Serena's smile was cold and calculating. "Alexander will never know I was involved. Your deaths will be tragic accidents. A fire in the tower, perhaps, or a fall from the window during a desperate escape attempt. I'll be the grieving stepmother who tried so hard to save you both." Isabella realized with horror that Queen Serena had planned every detail. The surveillance, the threats, even this confrontation, it was all designed to create a scenario where she and Sophia would die while Serena emerged as the sympathetic survivor. But Isabella also realized something else. Queen Serena was talking too much, revealing too much detail about her plans. The wire Isabella wore was recording every word, every confession, every admission of guilt. If Alexander and his team could hear this conversation, they now had everything they needed to expose Queen Serena's conspiracy. "There's just one problem with your plan," Isabella said, buying time while hoping Alexander was listening. "And what's that?" "Alexander will never stop looking for the truth. He'll investigate every detail until he finds out what really happened. And when he does, you'll spend the rest of your life in prison." For the first time, doubt flickered in Queen Serena's eyes. "Alexander is emotional, not analytical. He'll be too grief-stricken to think clearly." "You obviously don't know my husband very well," Isabella replied. "He's the most determined man I've ever met. And he loves Sophia and me more than his own life. He'll never stop until he finds justice for us." As if summoned by her words, Alexander's voice suddenly echoed through the tower room, amplified by speakers that Marcus had positioned around the building. "You're right, Isabella," Alexander's voice boomed. "I would never stop hunting for the truth. But fortunately, I won't have to, because every word Queen Serena just said has been recorded and transmitted to authorities throughout the kingdom. The game is over, Serena. Release my wife and daughter and surrender peacefully." Queen Serena's face twisted with rage and desperation. She had been outmaneuvered, and she knew it. But instead of surrendering, she moved toward the window with Sophia still in her arms. "If I can't have what I want," she screamed, "then no one can." The final confrontation was about to begin, and Isabella knew that the next few moments would determine whether her family survived or whether Queen Serena's madness would destroy them all. Everything they had endured, all the fear and surveillance and threats, had led to this moment, and Isabella was determined that love would triumph over hatred, that good would defeat evil, no matter what it cost her personally. As Queen Serena moved toward the window with Sophia, Isabella prepared to fight for her daughter's life with every ounce of strength and courage she possessed. The trap had been sprung, but the most dangerous part was yet to come. Her time seemed to slow as Queen Serena backed toward the tower window, with Sophia clutched against her chest. The baby's cries echoed off the stone walls, and Isabella could see the 50-foot drop to the courtyard below through the ancient opening. One wrong move, one moment of madness, and both Serena and Sophia could plummet to their deaths. "Don't do this," Isabella pleaded, taking a careful step forward. "Sophia is innocent. She's just a baby. Please don't hurt her because you're angry with me." Serena's laugh was wild and unhinged. "Innocent? She's the symbol of everything that should have been mine. The perfect royal baby for the perfect royal couple. Do you have any idea what it's like to watch someone else live the life you were meant to have?" Through her earpiece, Isabella could hear Alexander's voice directing his security team. "All snipers, hold your positions. Do not take the shot unless you have a clear target that won't endanger Princess Sophia. Marcus, how long until your team reaches the tower room?" 2 minutes, Your Highness," Marcus replied. "But if Queen Serena is by the window, that might be 2 minutes too long." Isabella knew she had to keep Queen Serena talking, had to find some way to reach whatever humanity might still exist beneath the madness. "Serena, I know you're hurt. I know you feel like life has been unfair to you. But taking it out on an innocent baby won't fix anything." "Life has been more than unfair," Serena snarled, her grip on Sophia tightening. "I spent 3 years pretending to love that pathetic old man, listening to him drone on about duty and tradition, all while planning for the future when Alexander would inherit the throne. I thought I would be the power behind his crown, the wise stepmother who guided the young king. Instead, he fell in love with a nobody from a minor noble family and ruined everything." Isabella felt a flash of anger at being called a nobody, but she pushed it down. Right now, keeping Serena calm was more important than defending her honor. You still could have had an important role in the kingdom. "Alexander respects your intelligence. He would have valued your counsel." "Respected my intelligence?" Serena's voice rose to a near shriek. "He barely tolerated my presence. Every family dinner, every state function, every public appearance, I could see it in his eyes. He knew I wasn't good enough for his father. He knew I didn't belong." Isabella realized with growing horror that Queen Serena's conspiracy wasn't just about jealousy or ambition. It was about a deep-seated insecurity and self-hatred that had festered until it consumed her completely. Serena had convinced herself that eliminating Isabella and Sophia would somehow validate her worth, would prove that she belonged in the royal family. "Serena," Isabella said gently, "killing us won't make Alexander love you. It won't make you feel worthy or important. It place in a man-child, surrounding real happiness." For a moment, something flickered in Serena's eyes. A hint of doubt, perhaps, or a flash of recognition that her plan would ultimately leave her more empty and alone than before. But then her expression hardened again, and Isabella knew the moment of potential reason had passed. "Happiness is a luxury I can't afford," Serena said coldly. "But revenge I can have. If I can't be happy, at least I can make sure Alexander suffers as much as I have." Sophia's cries had become weaker, more exhausted, and Isabella could see that the baby was becoming dehydrated and stressed from being held by a stranger for so long. Maternal instinct overrode caution, and Isabella took another step forward. "At least let me hold her," Isabella begged. "She needs her mother. She's scared and hungry and doesn't understand what's happening. Stay back," Serena warned, shifting Sophia in her arms in a way that made Isabella's heart stop. "One more step and I'll—" The threat was cut off as Alexander's voice filled the room again, but this time it wasn't coming from the speakers outside. This time Alexander himself appeared in the doorway to the tower room, flanked by Marcus and 2 other security officers. Let them go, Serena, Alexander said, his voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of barely controlled fury. You've made your point. I'm scared. You've shown us how much damage you can cause. But this ends now. Serena whirled to face the new arrivals, pressing her back against the window frame. You're too late, Alexander. Your precious family is about to become a tragic memory. Actually, Alexander said, pulling out his phone and holding it up so Serena could see the screen, you're the one who's too late. Everything you've said and done in the past hour has been recorded and transmitted to every major news outlet in the kingdom. Even if you somehow manage to hurt Isabella and Sophia, the entire world will know you for the murderer you are. Serena's face went white as she realized the full scope of her exposure. Not only had her plan failed, but her crimes would become public knowledge. There would be no hiding, no escape, no pretending to be the innocent victim. You've destroyed yourself, Serena, Alexander continued. Your reputation, your position, your future, it's all gone. The only choice you have left is whether you face justice as someone who ultimately chose to do the right thing, or as someone who murdered innocent people in a fit of rage. Isabella could see Serena wavering, caught between her desire for revenge and the growing realization that her situation was hopeless. But she could also see that Serena's grip on Sophia was becoming dangerously unstable as emotions overwhelmed her. Marcus, Isabella called out, never taking her eyes off Serena. Can you get a clean shot if she moves away from the window? Yes, Your Highness, Marcus replied quietly. But the angle is challenging with Princess Sophia in her arms. Isabella made a decision that would either save her daughter or cost them both their lives. She began moving slowly towards Serena, her hands raised in a peaceful gesture.
Isabella, don't... Alexander started.
Trust me, Isabella said firmly. Then, to Serena, you're right about one thing. You and I are very different people. But we're both mothers now. Serena looked confused. I'm not a mother. I've never had children. You've been holding my baby for over an hour, Isabella said. You've felt her heartbeat against your chest. You've heard her cries, seen her tears. Somewhere in that time, didn't you feel anything? Any connection? Any protective instinct? For the first time since the confrontation began, Serena looked down at Sophia. The baby had exhausted herself with crying and was now staring up at Serena with wide, trusting blue eyes. Isabella could see something shift in Serena's expression as she truly looked at the child she was holding. She looks like Alexander, Serena said softly, when he was a baby. I saw pictures. She's innocent, Isabella pressed. Whatever anger you have toward Alexander and me, Sophia has never done anything to hurt you. She doesn't even know who you are. You're just another person holding her. And babies trust the people who hold them. Irina's hands were trembling now, and Isabella could see tears beginning to form in her eyes. But the madness was lifting, replaced by the crushing weight of what she had almost done. I was going to, Serena's voice broke. I was going to kill a baby. Oh God, what have I become? Isabella took another step forward, close enough now that she could almost reach Sophia. Better. You can still choose to be better. You can still choose to save her instead of hurting her. The tower room fell silent except for Sophia's quiet whimpering and the sound of wind through the ancient window. Everyone held their breath as they waited to see which version of Queen Serena would emerge, the vengeful, broken woman who had planned murder or the human being who still had a chance to choose redemption. 8. Slowly, carefully, Serena extended her arms toward Isabella, offering Sophia back to her mother. Take her, Serena whispered. Please, just take her. Isabella gently lifted Sophia from Serena's arms, feeling the overwhelming relief of holding her daughter again. Sophia immediately quieted, recognizing her mother's scent and touch. Isabella kissed the baby's forehead and whispered soothing words, tears of joy streaming down her face. The moment Sophia was safe in Isabella's arms, Marcus and his security team moved swiftly to restrain Queen Serena. But she didn't resist. Instead, she collapsed to her knees, sobbing as the full weight of her actions crashed down upon her. I'm sorry, Serena wept. I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened to me. I don't know how I became this person. Alexander moved to Isabella's side, wrapping his arms around both his wife and daughter. For a moment, they simply stood there as a family, grateful to be alive and together after coming so close to tragedy. It's over, Alexander murmured into Isabella's hair. "You're both safe. It's finally over." But even as Alexander spoke those words, Isabella knew that while the immediate danger had passed, the emotional aftermath of this ordeal would linger for a long time. They had been betrayed by someone they trusted, violated in their own home, and forced to confront the reality that evil could exist even within their protected palace walls. Marcus approached them respectfully. "Fine. Your Highnesses, we should move you to a secure location while we process the scene and take Queen Serena into custody." As they prepared to leave the tower, Isabella looked back at Serena, who was being helped to her feet by security officers. The woman who had terrorized their family for months now looked broken and pathetic, a shadow of the elegant queen she had pretended to be. "What will happen to her?" Isabella asked. "A system assault, kidnapping, and attempted murder," Alexander replied. "The evidence we've gathered will ensure she spends the rest of her life in prison." Isabella nodded, holding Sophia closer. Justice would be served, but she couldn't help feeling a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Serena had chosen her path, but it was still tragic to see how jealousy and hatred had destroyed a woman who might have found happiness if she had made different choices. As they left the tower and walked through the palace corridors back to their private quarters, Isabella marveled at how different everything looked now. The hallways that had felt threatening and watched now seemed peaceful again. The rooms where hidden cameras had violated their privacy could become sanctuaries once more. "How long do you think it will take?" Isabella asked as they reached their private sitting room. "How long will what take?" Alexander replied, settling beside her on the sofa while Sophia slept peacefully in Isabella's arms. "For this to feel normal again, stop looking over my shoulder, stop wondering if someone's watching us." Alexander considered the question carefully. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I promise you that we'll have the best security possible, and more importantly, we'll have each other. Whatever time it takes to heal, we'll take it together." As they sat in the quiet warmth of their private space, watching their daughters sleep and slowly beginning to process everything they had endured, Isabella felt the first stirrings of peace she had experienced in months. The nightmare was over, but their life together was just beginning to return to normal. The hidden cameras were gone. The threats had ended. Queen Serena was in custody, and the truth of her conspiracy was being revealed to the world. Most importantly, their family was safe, intact, and stronger than ever after surviving the ultimate test of their love and trust. The palace would never feel quite the same, and they would always be more cautious about who they trusted. But they had learned that their love for each other was powerful enough to overcome even the darkest threats, and that knowledge would sustain them through whatever challenges lay ahead. Sophia stirred in Isabella's arms, opening her blue eyes and looking up at her parents with the perfect trust that only babies possess. In that moment, Isabella knew that no matter what dangers they might face in the future, their family would endure. Love had triumphed over hatred, trust had overcome betrayal, and hope had defeated despair. The hidden camera that had started it all was now evidence in a criminal case, but its true legacy was the strength it had revealed in their family bonds. They had been tested in the crucible of fear and emerged unbroken, ready to face whatever the future might hold together, justice and redemption. 6 months had passed since the terrifying night in the East Tower, and the morning sun now streamed through the windows of Valdoria Palace's royal courtroom as the final day of Queen Serena's trial commenced. Prince Alexander sat in the gallery beside Isabella, who held a now 1-year-old Sophia on her lap. The baby had grown into a happy, healthy toddler with bright blue eyes and golden curls, showing no signs of the trauma she had endured as an infant. The courtroom was packed with members of the royal family, government officials, and representatives from international media who had followed the sensational case. The story of the queen who had conspired to murder her stepson's family had captivated the world, revealing the dark underbelly of palace intrigue and the lengths to which jealousy and ambition could drive someone. Judge Margaret Thornfield, one of the kingdom's most respected jurists, presided over the proceedings with stern dignity. She had heard 3 weeks of testimony, examined mountains of evidence, and listened to recordings that had chilled even seasoned legal professionals. Today, she would deliver her verdict and sentence. Alexander watched as Queen Serena was brought into the courtroom in handcuffs. The transformation was startling. Gone was the elegant, commanding woman who had once moved through palace corridors with regal grace. In her place sat a broken figure dressed in plain gray clothes, her once perfect platinum hair now showing dark roots and her emerald eyes hollow with exhaustion and regret. The evidence against Serena had been overwhelming. The surveillance devices found throughout the palace, the recorded confessions from the tower room, the communications with Viktor Kozlov, and the testimonies from palace staff who had noticed her suspicious behavior all painted a clear picture of premeditated conspiracy to commit murder. During the trial, the full scope of Serena's planning had been revealed. She had spent months studying the palace layout, identifying security vulnerabilities, and developing multiple scenarios for eliminating Isabella and Sofia while making their deaths appear accidental. The level of detail in her preparations had shocked even hardened investigators. Viktor Kozlov had been arrested at the same time as Serena, and his testimony had revealed that Serena had paid him substantial sums to provide weapons and tactical support for her planned attacks. It also confirmed that Serena had discussed making the murders look like accidents caused by security failures, which would have cast suspicion on the palace guard rather than on Serena herself. Isabella shifted Sofia in her arms as the baby began to fuss slightly. The past 6 months had been a journey of healing for their family. Isabella had required therapy to overcome the anxiety and paranoia that had developed during the months of surveillance, and both she and Alexander had struggled with trust issues that extended beyond their immediate family to the entire palace staff. They had implemented comprehensive security reforms, including background checks for all personnel, regular sweeps for surveillance devices, and new protocols for access to the royal family's private quarters. Marcus had been promoted to head of royal security, and several staff members who had assisted Serena, knowingly or unknowingly, had been dismissed. King Charles had aged significantly during the trial. The revelation that his beloved wife had been planning to murder his granddaughter had devastated the elderly monarch. He had publicly apologized to Alexander and Isabella for bringing such danger into their lives, and he had spent countless hours in private sessions with therapists and clergy, trying to understand how he had been so completely deceived by the woman he loved. The relationship between father and son had actually grown stronger through the crisis. Charles had seen how bravely Alexander had protected his family, and Alexander had witnessed his father's genuine remorse and commitment to making amends. They were working together now to strengthen the monarchy's security and transparency in ways that would prevent future deceptions. Judge Thornfield called the court to order and the room fell silent. We are here today for the sentencing of Serena Elizabeth Hartwell, formerly Queen Serena of Valdoria, who has been found guilty on all charges brought against her. The charges had been extensive: conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, kidnapping, assault, illegal surveillance, conspiracy with foreign agents, and treason. Each charge carried significant prison time, and legal experts had predicted that Serena would spend the rest of her life incarcerated. Before I pronounce sentence, Judge Thornfield continued, I will allow the defendant to make a final statement to the court. Serena slowly stood, her legs shaking slightly. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible, forcing everyone in the courtroom to strain to hear her words. Your Honor, there is nothing I can say that will excuse what I did or undo the pain I caused. I terrorized an innocent family, threatened the life of a baby, and betrayed the trust of everyone who welcomed me into the royal family. Serena paused, looking directly at Alexander and Isabella for the first time during the trial. I was consumed by jealousy and self-hatred. I convinced myself that I deserved the happiness that Prince Alexander and Princess Isabella had found together, and when I realized I couldn't have it, I decided to destroy it instead. Tears began to flow down Serena's cheeks. What I did was evil. There's no other word for it. I became a monster, and I nearly committed acts that would have haunted me for the rest of my life, if I had been capable of living with myself afterward. Alexander found himself listening intently despite his anger toward the woman who had threatened his family. There was something different about Serena's demeanor today, something that suggested genuine remorse rather than the manipulative performance he had expected. I want Princess Isabella and Prince Alexander to know that my actions had nothing to do with them personally, Serena continued. Prayerist, they are good people who deserve better than to be terrorized by someone's twisted jealousy. Princess Sophia is a beautiful, innocent child who should have been cherished and protected, not threatened. Serena turned back to Judge Thornfield. I know I will spend the rest of my life in prison, and I accept that as just punishment for my crimes. I only ask that the court consider allowing me to participate in therapy programs that might help me understand how I became capable of such evil, so that perhaps my experience can be used to help others who struggle with similar destructive emotions. Judge Thornfield nodded solemnly. The defendant will be seated while I pronounce sentence. The courtroom was absolutely silent as Judge Thornfield consulted her notes and prepared to deliver a sentence that would determine Serena's fate for the remainder of her life. Serena Elizabeth Hartwell, Judge Thornfield began, your crimes strike at the very heart of civilized society. You violated the sacred trust of family. You threatened the lives of innocent people, and you conspired with foreign agents to destabilize the monarchy that gave you status and privilege. Alexander felt Isabella tense beside him. Although they knew Serena would receive a harsh sentence, hearing the formal pronouncement still felt emotionally significant. However, Judge Thornfield continued, the court also notes that you ultimately chose not to complete your planned murders. When faced with the final moment of decision, you found the humanity to return Princess Sophia to her mother unharmed. But this does not excuse your crimes, but it does suggest that you are capable of moral choice when your better nature prevails over your destructive impulses. Judge Thornfield looked directly at Serena. On the charges of conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, kidnapping, and assault, this court sentences you to life imprisonment without possibility of parole for the first 30 years. On the charges of illegal surveillance and conspiracy with foreign agents, you will serve an additional 20 years. On the charge of treason, you will serve 15 years. The sentences would run concurrently, meaning Serena would be eligible for parole in 30 years, when she would be nearly 70 years old. Bad. Furthermore, Judge Thornfield added, the court orders that you participate in comprehensive psychological therapy during your incarceration, both for your own rehabilitation and to contribute to research that might prevent similar crimes in the future. As court officers prepared to escort Serena away, she turned once more toward Alexander and Isabella. I'm sorry, she said, loudly enough for them to hear clearly. I know those words are inadequate, but I am truly deeply sorry for what I put you through. Alexander found himself nodding slightly in acknowledgement. He would never forgive Serena for threatening his family, but he could accept her apology as genuine. It didn't change what she had done, but it suggested that the woman who had once been his stepmother wasn't entirely lost to the madness that had consumed her. After Serena was removed from the courtroom, Alexander, Isabella, and Sophia made their way through the crowds of reporters and well-wishers outside the courthouse. The media attention had been intense throughout the trial, but public opinion had been overwhelmingly supportive of the royal family throughout their ordeal. That evening, the royal family gathered in the palace's private dining room for a quiet dinner. King Charles looked more at peace than he had in months, finally able to begin moving forward now that justice had been served. The old king had aged during the crisis, but he had also found new strength in his relationships with his son, daughter-in-law, and granddaughter. I keep thinking about what she said in court today, Isabella mused as she fed Sophia small pieces of fruit, about therapy and understanding how she became capable of such evil. Do you think people can really change that fundamentally? Alexander considered the question carefully. I think people can change if they truly want to, and if they're willing to do the hard work required. But I also think some damage runs so deep that change becomes nearly impossible. What I find most troubling, King Charles added, is how completely I was fooled by her. I prided myself on being a good judge of character, but I missed all the warning signs. How does someone hide such darkness so effectively? Marcus, who had been invited to join them as both a security advisor and a friend, offered his perspective. In my experience, Your Majesty, people like Queen Serena become very skilled at showing others what they want to see. She studied each of you and became the person she thought you would love and trust. The conversation continued throughout dinner, touching on themes of trust, forgiveness, justice, and healing. It was the kind of deep, meaningful discussion that the family had learned to value even more after their ordeal. They had all been reminded of how precious and fragile their relationships were. Later that night, Alexander and Isabella sat in their private sitting room while Sophia played with her toys on a blanket nearby. The baby's laughter filled the space with joy, a sound that had become even more meaningful after they had almost lost the chance to hear it. Do you think she'll really change? Isabella asked, returning to their earlier conversation about Serena. I hope so, Alexander replied honestly, not for her sake, but because I think healing requires the possibility of redemption, even for people who've done terrible things. If we give up hope that people can change, we lose something important about our own humanity. Isabella leaned against Alexander's shoulder, watching Sophia stack colorful blocks with determined concentration. I never thought I'd say this, but I actually felt a little sorry for her today. She looked so broken, so lost.
I know what you mean, Alexander admitted.
I still despise what she did to us, but I could see glimpses of the pain and insecurity that drove her to such extremes. It doesn't excuse her actions, but it helps me understand them. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, simply enjoying the peaceful normalcy of a quiet evening with their daughter. The past 6 months had taught them not to take such moments for granted. Alexander, Isabella said eventually, do you think we'll ever feel completely safe again? Alexander considered the question seriously. I think we'll learn to feel safe in different ways. We'll never be naive about the potential for danger, but we'll also never doubt our ability to protect each other and overcome whatever challenges we face. As if to emphasize his point, Sophia crawled over to her parents and pulled herself up to stand against the sofa. Alexander and Isabella both laughed and praised their daughter's achievement, marveling at how quickly she was growing and developing. The hidden camera that had started their nightmare was now stored in an evidence locker, but its legacy lived on in the changes it had brought to their lives. They were more cautious, but also more grateful. They trusted less easily, but loved more deeply. They had faced the worst that human nature could offer and emerged with their family bonds stronger than ever. In the months and years that followed, Queen Serena would indeed participate in therapy programs during her imprisonment. Her case would become a study in criminal psychology, helping researchers understand the factors that drive people to extreme acts of violence. She would never be released from prison, but she would find purpose in contributing to efforts that might prevent others from following her destructive path. King Charles would live for several more years, long enough to see Sophia take her first steps, speak her first words, and begin to show signs of the intelligence and compassion that would make her a worthy heir to the throne. He would also have the satisfaction of knowing that his son had proven himself to be everything a king should be: brave, wise, protective, and deeply committed to his family and his people. Alexander and Isabella would go on to have 2 more children, and Sophia would grow up to be a confident, caring young woman with no memory of the danger she had faced as a baby. The palace would remain secure, the royal family would prosper, and the kingdom would be strengthened by the knowledge that their future monarchs had been tested in the crucible of adversity and emerged unbroken. The story of the hidden camera would become part of palace lore, a reminder that vigilance is the price of safety, and that love is the strongest force for good in an uncertain world. And every year on Sophia's birthday, Alexander and Isabella would take a moment to remember how close they came to losing everything, and how grateful they were for the family they had fought so hard to protect. Justice had been served, redemption remained possible even for the guilty, and love had triumphed over hatred. The palace walls would always hold the memory of what had happened within them, but they would also hold the promise of all the joy and love that was yet to